Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to talk about the basics of graphing quadratic functions. So the first thing I want to do is just remind you of what a quadratic function is. Okay, so we know that a quadratic function is a function with the highest exponent of the variable being 2. Okay, we know that normally they look like y equals ax squared plus bx plus c, right? They don't always look like this, but this is the standard form. Okay. Now, the graph of a quadratic has its own name, and it's called a parabola. Okay, so the function itself is called a quadratic, right? And then the graph is called a parabola. Okay, this graph has a U shape. Okay, and you can see the general example of that shape over here to the right. Okay. Now let's talk about some different parts of this graph. Okay, now this center point on the graph right here, okay, is a very important part of the graph, and this is called the vertex. Okay, so again, you can see our vertex on this graph labeled here in purple, and this is the point 3, -2. Okay. So this is an important point of the graph, and I want to remind you, okay, that the vertex form of a parabola or of a quadratic equation is a times x minus h squared plus k, okay, where hk is the vertex. All right. Now, there's also some other important points on the graph of a quadratic function. So let's look at these other points here. So we have these 2 points. Okay, we already know about these points, right? These are the x-intercepts. Okay. Now, in this example, you can see that this is the point 1, 0, okay, and this is the point 5, 0. I also want to remind you that we know that the x-intercepts come from the factored form, okay? So we have the factored form a times x minus m times x minus n, okay, where m0 and n0 are the factors, or sorry, are the x-intercepts. Okay. I also want to remind you that we find the x-intercepts by setting y equal to 0. Okay. Now, there is one other important point on the graph of the parabola. I mean, there are lots of important points. We will talk about others in the next video, but the last one that we actually already know about is the y-intercept of the graph. Okay, so in this example, you can see the y-intercept, right here. Okay, and this looks like it's at 0, 2.5. Okay, so let me remind you of what the y-intercept is. Okay, so for any graph, the y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the y-axis, and for any graph, we find this by setting x equal to 0. Okay, so we can see it here on our example at the point 0, 2.5. Okay. All right, so in the next video, we will talk about one method for actually creating the graph, but now we have all the tools to talk about the different parts of the graph, and I will see you guys in class.